So we are waiting for the results of apparently the presidential election in Georgia.
It's sure what it looks like.
I mean, is that what's happening? It's just...
I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, we've got round tables and panels and people on site and, I feel like
Karen Handel and John Ossoff are running for president. And this is the
state of Georgia.
And I haven't heard this yet, but I'm surprised I haven't. Maybe this is the most important election of our lifetime. We hear that every election.
Yeah, we do.
But I mean, they spent almost $50 million.
Most expensive House race in history.
And I'm thinking, I tweeted this out. I'm like, y'all realize this is just one congressional race?
And a small district, too.
In a small district? What is happening? Watching the coverage of it, which is good, I guess, because, nothing else really bad is going on, even though there actually are some pretty bad things going on.
Happening.
But I'm watching the coverage, and I'm like, oh, it's another presidential election, I think. It sure seems like it. By the way, I can't wait until I want the Republican Karen Handel to win for one reason. I mean, more than one reason, but one main reason is I want to see the headlines using her last name Handel, because there's got to be the creativity of that. Ossoff couldn't handle Karen Handel. The Republicans got a handle on the election. That's the main reason I wanted. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. The election is beyond reason, but I don't know if we'll get the results anytime soon, but if we get the results as they're coming in, I will update as the show goes on. I mean, the main reason why it's become such a big deal is they're trying to create a perception, and perception is everything in politics these days, a perception, not necessarily reality, but a perception of this being a referendum on Trump. So they feel like whoever wins, it's a referendum on Trump, a referendum for 2018, a referendum for the future. I didn't know Georgia had that much political clout, but apparently it does.
But what I don't understand is why Republicans fed into it. They fed into the story.
Oh, yeah.
They fed into the whole referendum. They fed into all of the hype of this district.
Trump has been tweeting. Vice President Mike Pence, Newt Gingrich had a piece on it. I think Ted Cruz was out there today campaigning. All kinds of stuff. And so there you go. And I'm just like, isn't this just one district? By the way, I said my name already, but that is producer Paul, who produces for me on Tuesday nights as well. So I want to get into something else actually here. The biggest thing...
Before you do, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Can you name the counties that this district encompasses?
No, not a one. Not a single one. I cannot, no.
Any of the cities?
No. No, I can't.
Okay, that sounds about right.
I bet most people that are keeping track of this can't either. I don't think.
I bet you're right.
I have not cared enough because it's one small district in Georgia. It's beyond reason. Okay, can I move on to what I want to talk about now?
Yeah,
is that okay?
You
is that
can.
Okay
Until
with you?
they, spit out the results in 5 minutes. Wait, no, that's not possible. So go ahead.
Exactly right. Okay, so the thing that has caused the biggest debate of my fellow conservative friends and fellow conservative pundits out there and on my Facebook and everything is the fact of Trump supporters going to the Julius Caesar play that depicts Trump as Caesar being assassinated and interrupting that play. And I talked about it on this show. Well, I didn't talk about that specifically, but I've addressed the whole idea of how everyone's obsessed with fighting fire with fire. And I've been saying eventually we're just going to burn everything down if we keep doing that. Is that the goal? But so there were some protesters at the Julius Caesar play that stopped the play and disrupted it and said they did it to support Trump. And I actually have some audio of that, Paul, on the audio clips there. play the audio of one of the protesters interrupting the play. It happened the end of last week in terms of he's a Trump supporter and he's yelling, Goebbels, Goebbels. Play it for me.
You are all Goebbels.
Yes.
You are all Nazis like Joseph Goebbels. This is Goebbels. You are all Goebbels. You are inciting terrorists. The blood of Steve Scalise is on your hands. The blood of Steve Scalise is on your hands. Goebbels would be proud.
So Goebbels will be proud. We're finding out now that they actually had a Caesar play that depicted Obama in that way in 2011, one of Hillary. But everything that I hear from, I don't think this is right, because I think what should be protected most of all is the First Amendment, is speech. I think we should allow others in art or in speech to speak without having to be interrupted. Because what these protesters were doing, they're not protesting, really. They're shutting down speech.
Right.
And I talked about this, how we all complained when on college campuses there were these protests, there was these riots, and the goal was to shut down speech. The goal was not to protest. It was to prevent that person from speaking. We all said, that's not right. That's against the First Amendment. This should not be allowed.
Because if you want to protest, you can protest outside, whatever it is, or across the street or whatever, while the thing is still happening.
Yeah, and it has to be peaceful.
Right.
Sometimes it got violent, and it should not get violent. And this is something we should all support, but it's something that our side should specifically support. But now what I'm hearing is, well, the left has gone so crazy that we have to fight fire with fire. We have to do this to fight back. We've had enough, and we have to do this to fight back. Forget principles. It's about winning. So I was thinking about this, and I'm like, what is a good lesson here? What is a good example here of how we really should be reacting to this? So, of course, I thought about my favorite movie of all time, The Dark Knight, with Christian Bale by Christopher Nolan and Heath Ledger, the best movie of all time. And I was thinking, that movie actually has a good message for us on what it could teach us in this situation, because it actually has some parallels. And I was thinking, maybe I can use this to get the point across, and just because I love Batman as well. But, of course, we need some background music. We need the music of... Yes. All right. I love the theme song, too. This might be an excuse to just use that theme song.
I kind of think that's what this is.
Yes.
But that's okay. It's your show.
Play it under. Yes, it's a little beyond reason, but that's fine. It's the name of the show. So, but I wanted to talk about this because this movie actually kind of goes along the same lines when you think about it. So in the movie The Dark Knight, Batman, we all know the story of Batman. Batman is a vigilante. Batman sometimes breaks the rules. Things had gotten so bad in Gotham City in the story that the cops weren't taking care of it. So he was out there being a vigilante, sort of breaking the rules somewhat. But then what happens next? Well, in the movie The Dark Knight, the Joker comes along. And the Joker has no rules at all. None. And that is his advantage. He is trying to create chaos. He is trying to create destruction. He is trying literally to burn everything down. And this is actually one of the messages.
Sounds so familiar.
Yeah, and this is actually one of the messages in this movie. And one thing you hear constantly in this movie and in this story is, I mean, there's actually a lot of different good messages, but one thing you hear constantly is there is so much pressure on Batman, on his character. Even though, yes, sometimes things got so bad you have to bend the rules a little bit. The Joker, one of his goals throughout the movie is to get Batman to break that one rule. He tries to get Batman throughout the movie, and he even says it, you're going to have to break the rule to find out. And he talks to one of the mobsters, and the mobster says, this guy has no rules.
That's right.
That's why we're siding with him. And the Joker is so violent and so vicious and so much destruction that they're starting to think, you're going to have to break your rule if you want to defeat this guy. Now, what is his one rule? His one rule in the movie is he doesn't kill. And that's kind of been a big theme of Batman, even though the new Batman, Superman, he just kills apparently everyone all of the time. But we'll forget that movie even exists. This is the real Batman, in my opinion. So, but he throughout the movie, he has that one rule. And they're even saying that. They're like, this guy has no rules. You have to break the rules. He's like, I have one rule. And he's like, that's not good enough. The Joker has gone so far to the extreme that people are thinking Batman's going to have to break the rule. He's going to have to kill the Joker. And I've actually read a book. It's called Batman on Philosophy that goes through all this on whether Batman should kill the Joker and what that means. But the whole point of him having that one rule is that is so sacred. For one, his parents got killed, so he doesn't want to kill as well. That's why he doesn't use guns as well. But it's such a sacred rule in his opinion, the value of human life, even for the criminal, that even though you're fighting crime, so you don't become the criminal. Because if Batman breaks his rule and kills the Joker, he actually starts to become what he hates. He actually starts to become like the Joker. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is this is such a comparison, in my opinion, to where we are today. That throughout that movie, they're trying to get Batman to break the rule, and they say, you have to. The other side is, Joker is so crazy, you have to. This is what I'm hearing all the time from some conservatives, Trump supporters, everything that support what these protesters did, and that support shutting down speech, and that support even just some of the worst rhetoric out there. And I hear all the time, well, the left has gone so crazy that we have to fight fire with fire. And this is the only way we can defeat them. And I'm telling you right now, I understand that sometimes you have to break little rules. The best example of that would be Martin Luther King and civil disobedience. And he needed to break some rules. But to me, as conservatives, our one rule, like Batman has a rule, our one rule that we should not break and we should stick to our principles on is free speech and the First Amendment. And the left, you can argue with me all day, well, the left's breaking the rules, the left's trying to get us to do this, the left's trying to get us to be extreme. And I'm telling you right now, I understand all those arguments with some people. You listen to Keith Olbermann lately, he's gone kind of nuts. But I don't want to become Keith Olbermann. I don't want to become the Joker, for instance. I think our one rule that we should not break as conservatives is we should stand up for free speech, that we should stand up for the First Amendment, that we should not be trying to shut down speech just because we disagree with it. That's why they're shutting down they're trying to shut down the Julius Caesar play. They don't really believe it's a threat. They just disagree with it, and they're tired of the rhetoric on the other side, and they think we have to fight back. I hear it all the time, fight fire with fire. And I understand the temptation to do that. But we don't want to become them. We cannot become what we disagree with. We cannot become what we hate, because otherwise, then what's the point of all this? If we're not fighting for principles, if we're not fighting for something more, then why are we doing this? We're just going to create more chaos. So that is my lesson. If I can't get it across to you, maybe Batman and The Dark Knight, the best movie of all time, can get it across to you. What?
You want to listen to Beyond Reason Radio live on your smartphone? Download the Beyond Reason Radio app now. Available in the Google Play or Apple App Stores. The voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason is back now.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason, the voice of truth, your Batman, your Dark Knight. Maybe I just want to be Batman. Maybe that was the whole point of that. I just want you to think of me.
Your Dark Knight of conservatism.
Yes, your Dark Knight of conservatism. I don't know if I could beat a lot of these people in fights like he does. I have not trained in the secret martial arts that he does, but
You're trained in the proper role of government.
Yes.
And the foundation of conservative principles.
Look at that. That is so true.
There you go.
So, but more on this point, because I really think this might be the biggest point of the day, because it's just something that everyone on my side, I get the most flack for, is this point. And I get some people are saying, well, you're like secretly a Democrat or something because you don't support these protesters ending speech and Trump. And all I can think to myself is, because every time I hear someone argue, if we need to fight fire with fire, I never hear what we're fighting for anymore.
Whoa, fighting. We're fighting for?
It's all... Yeah.
We're fighting to.
Exactly. We're fighting against.
Yeah, we're fighting against them, fill in the blank, and we're fighting to win.
Yes, and I constantly hear that all the time, and I never hear what we're winning anymore. I think we just want to win. And I'll hear some people say, the Constitution. And I'm thinking, but what does that mean? Because it does mean something. For instance, the First Amendment is an amendment to the Constitution. It should be protected. So that's something we fight for. The proper role of government is something we fight for. But I saw, especially in the last election, I saw all these people that say they were fighting for the Constitution and fighting against the left, and that's why we need to win. I saw them throw out every principle in the book around the proper role of government just to win.
That's right.
And that's when alarm bells started going off in my head, and I'm thinking, whoa, wait a minute. This is not why I got involved in this. This is not why I got into talk radio. This is not why I talk politics. I don't talk politics just to hate the other side. That's easy. And by the way, it is easy.
It's so easy.
It would be.
You can pick any side. I do it on Facebook every day. I pick a side.
You really do.
And people are like, "Oh, people have called me everything but a child of God."
I'll see you throw things out there, and I'm like, he doesn't believe that.
It's got like 120 comments.
You do it all the time. By the way, you can send me a friend request on Facebook. Search Michael Yaffee, send me a friend request, or you can like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page, and you can watch the live video of the show on there right now. So there was a piece in the Daily Wire by a guy by the name of John Nolte that's getting a lot of attention. And the reason is because Ben Shapiro, who runs the Daily Wire, disagrees with him. So there's a back and forth, but they're allowing this to happen on their site. But he said something that kind of concerns me, and I usually agree with this guy. But it's on this whole point on whether these protesters did the right thing in protesting that event and interrupting the Julius Caesar thing that depicts Trump as Caesar being assassinated, which is, by the way, it's just dumb. Trump is not Julius Caesar.
Whoa, watch your mouth.
He is not Caesar, okay? Do we realize how Caesar came into power? Have you read the history of why Caesar came into power? It was after a brutal civil war that engulfed the country through violence, and they gave him military powers to take over, and it's just a completely different situation. He was not this duly elected president like Trump and all this stuff. It's just silly. But John Nolte, he has a piece here that I want to get into because there's something he says that I just couldn't believe. He said, Saturday night, after civil rights activists disrupted President Trump's staged assassination in Central Park, I was reading the attacks from those on the right, including Ben Shapiro, who opposed this tactic. And all I saw from them was complaints, anger, and the lofty espousing of principles.
It took me so long to figure out what that was supposed to mean.
Principle. Well, it's mocking.
Yeah, I knew, but it was just weird.
Yeah. Well, it is weird, but he's mocking. So he's basically, because people like me are saying we need to at least stick to the principle that we don't shut down other speech. And he's mocking that. Principles. Oh, you and your principles. I'm like, we're at this point now where we're mocking people standing up for their principles? And we are. For a lot of people, that's exactly how they feel. When Trump's comments came out about him grabbing the pee And I came on the air in the morning show. And I said, this isn't really about voting for Trump, but I feel like too many Christians are sort of excusing it.
I remember when you did that.
And as Christians, we probably shouldn't do that. And I got so much flack, and it was this same type of thing. Oh, well, get off your high horse. Oh, more principles. And then I'm like thinking, that time you were mocking Christian principles, which is even worse. But I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, you're mocking principles? Isn't that what we're fighting for? If we're not fighting for principles, what are we fighting for? I literally don't know. And I just don't like the whole idea of mocking. He continues on. He says, honest people agree that we have exhausted our response to the left's ongoing boycott, disruptions, and acts of outright violence. Our oh-so-superior appeals to reason with eloquent op-eds that eloquently articulate our eloquent principles, he likes that word eloquent, regarding free and civilized debate have failed completely. Honestly, they haven't failed completely. This is another point that I'm hearing that, well, we have just lost, and we have to do this to win because we've lost the debate because the left's gone too crazy.
And I've heard that too, and I'm wondering, where's the loss?
That's exactly right. We haven't completely lost. There are some things where the pop culture is kind of winning, especially the transgender stuff, which we're going to get into later in the show.
You always do that when I'm on here, too.
I know. I do it on purpose because you're on here, because I love your reaction to it. But the Republicans, because of conservatives standing up for principles through the Tea Party, own the House of Representatives. They own the Senate. They now have the presidency. They have most of the state and local legislatures in the country.
All the governorships almost.
Yeah, most of the governorships in the country. And yet I'm hearing we've lost. This is just not true. Yes, there are some things where the left has gone crazy, but I think there are better ways to fight against it. And this was the argument in Europe, especially around the time in the beginning of the 20th century and before, was people were so sick of the monarchies and whatever, and they wanted communism. And these groups would do the most violent tactics out there. Brutal groups, communist groups. And then you had the National Socialists and the Brown Church. They would do the most brutal things, but they would excuse it as the end, the ends justify the means. But no, there are some means that are unjustifiable. And I don't want to become these vicious groups just because, we've just failed completely. We haven't failed. And in fact, what Trump showed by winning and what all these elections have showed is that people are sick. And we were actually getting some leftists on our side. Bernie Sanders, Bill Maher, Piers Morgan, all were denouncing the mass protests on these college campuses. We were getting them on our side because we had the issue right. We had the principles. And yet we're hearing this, we have to fight back because we're losing. We're not losing. He said, as they break windows, hurl eggs, shoot us, shout us down, cause havoc, and attempt to boycott our leading voices into oblivion, and we make speeches and write op-eds, the left is pointing and laughing, as well as they should, he says. Weakness invites aggression from bullies. Standing by your principles is exactly that, standing by. Could you imagine telling that to Martin Luther King when they wanted him to get violent? And he said, no, I will not do that. I will not break that rule, as I've talked about before. I'm going to stand by that principle of nonviolence. Oh, well, it's not working. But it does work. If we have if we're right on the issue, sometimes the moral high ground is the good thing. Well, just look at Christianity and the spread of Christianity.
It takes too long. We want to win now. We want to win now. Now, I go back to your point. I don't know what we're losing. I don't know what conservatives are losing.
I mean, there are some things.
Well, here's the thing that I look at, and here's a perfect example of the concept of losing without the actuality of losing, and that is Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter leaves conservatives with the concept that they are losing this fight, they are losing their voice, they are losing. But if you look at what the goal, the perceived or prescribed goal of Black Lives Matter was, they're not losing.
Right.
Because Black Lives Matter has not truly affected anything in this country.
Yeah, I mean,
hasn't changed a thing.
The debate, but you're right. And well, I wouldn't say that the push for body cams probably has a lot to do with it.
The push for body cams.
I understand your point is that there's this perception of us losing. But and we think, well, we've been losing for decades. But that's actually not true. There are actually some issues where we're winning. Abortion's a big one.
Yep.
Where abortion's changing. School choice is another one. School choice is being implemented in a lot of states. Homeschooling used to be illegal in most states in this country. Now it is legal in, I think, every state in the country.
But the thing is, just because you don't have the perception that you're winning the debate does not mean you're not winning the overall aspect of reframing the mind of the people in the debate.
Exactly.
And that's what's happening with conservatism, that there are many people. Now, granted, you're going to have your crazies that are going to go far extreme one way, and you're going to have your crazies that are going to go far extreme the other way. But overall, the idea and concept of conservatism is growing. It really is growing.
Yes.
Even without the nut jobs that are far, far crazy right, and without the nut jobs that are far, far crazy left. The overall concept of, okay, what is the proper role of government in this aspect is growing. The overall concept of Christian principles is growing.
Yeah. 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. I'm going to play my voice of reason of the day as well. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
You know what's beyond reason? Yaffee is now on YouTube. Go to YouTube now and just search Beyond Reason Radio.
All right, so it looks like we're having some technical difficulties. I know they've been working on updating Next Gen or whatever, so we'll come back. So why don't we just go ahead and play our voice of reason of the day. In terms of somebody that I think has actually been a voice of reason in the whole Trump obstruction talk has actually been Alan Dershowitz, and he's created some controversy, and this is another thing where everyone seems to create a lot of debate on my Facebook or whatever. And by the way, you can send me a friend request on Facebook. Search Michael Yaffee, send me a friend request. I will accept it. This has created a lot of different debate out there, and I think he's been someone, and remember, he's a lifelong Democrat, and he's not necessarily someone who likes Trump, but he's been talking and he's been saying how we've gotten so extreme with politics once again, with the political rhetoric, that it's not good to the future because now we're turning politics into criminal things when really we should not be doing that. So I wanted to play this audio here from Alan Dershowitz and go over what he said, because I figured this is our voice of reason of the day. Here's what he said.
How can Robert Mueller, Bronze Star and all, sterling reputation as well, honestly be dispassionate?
Well, he can't, especially since he would be called as the first witness by the president if there were a case, having him testify in front of Congress. The president had the right to fire him. The president had the right to make him stop the investigation. The other witness for the president, of course, would be Rothstein, who wrote the memo saying you should fire Comey. So this is becoming very political when you have the Justice Department itself being on both sides, prosecuting the president possibly, and also serving as defense witnesses for the president. This is just becoming too political on both sides. Now you have Republicans saying, lock her up. Let's put the former Attorney General Lynch in jail. We got to stop this. We have to stop criminalizing political differences. The criminal law should be reserved for obvious violations of the criminal law that exists, not for making political points against your political enemies on both sides.
I hear you.
Well, I think we have to be objective and neutral on both sides. I would be against an obstruction of justice investigation directed against the Clintons, directed against Lynch. I don't want to see broadening of the obstruction of justice statute on either side. And yet what we have in America today is Republicans trying to expand espionage, trying to expand obstruction of justice to get Democrats trying to expand it to get a Republican. Who are the big losers? We, the American people, our civil liberties, our constitutional rights. The first victim of partisanship is often civil liberties and constitutional rights.
So, and I think there are some points that he makes there where he is exactly right. Because what he is basically saying, he's been saying this for a while, is that this whole thing with obstruction of justice with Trump, and really he's even expanding it to the other side with Loretta Lynch or whatever. He is saying, look, things have gotten so political that we're looking at what should be criminal cases. And when you look at criminal cases like this, there's a high precedent for that. When you're talking about obstruction of justice, you can't just have a couple of things. You need to have a lot of evidence in place to prove that someone has committed obstruction of justice. So what he's talking about here is what has happened. And maybe this has been happening for a long time, who knows. But he says we've expanded the term. We've expanded the use of obstruction of justice. And he says both sides are doing it. And we're expanding it so much that things that should be high criminal cases is now just in the realm of partisan politics. And he says this is really troubling in the big picture. And you know me, I'm a big picture guy. And everyone wants to get in the whole details of everything. But in the big picture of this, what he is pointing out is who loses in this situation. Well, he says the American people lose. Because once you start using criminal allegations in partisan politics, for one, it stops the government from working because it just ties up in constant scandals all the time. But he says the American people lose their civil liberties in the long run. There's a reason why we have these criminal statutes, and there's a reason why there's a hard bar to meet some of these criminal statutes, including obstruction of justice. But that's not what's happening here. What's happening here is you have it where it's being used for partisan politics. And it's happening on both sides. And it's not really good for the future of the country. So do we have any results, Paul, on the Georgia race? Are we figured out his Handel or Ossoff?
The president of Georgia yet?
Yeah, the president of Georgia.
No, we don't have any results in the Georgia presidency race yet.
No. I mean, I thought we were.
I've got a lot of alerts and a lot of breaking news.
Yes,
but no results.
No, I mean, this is the most important election. Apparently,
it is. Yeah, it's the most important election of 2017, I guess.
Well, technically, maybe because it's the only election really of 2017. All right, we'll see what goes on. So, to end this hour, I'm going to get into a couple things that are so beyond reason, you can't make them up. You just can't make them up. I've done this before. By the way, later in the show, in the next hour, I'm going to get into the Obamacare stuff because there's a lot of debate over repealing Obamacare, the new health care bill, of the Senate kind of hiding the health care bill, and the Democrats are all upset. And I'm going to get into the real issue there because the Democrats are making it about they're trying to hide it from the Democrats, and that's why they're doing this all in secret. I think, while that's an interesting political ploy they're using, I think that's actually not true. And the real reason why they're hiding it is actually worse, at least for those who listen to me and agree with me. So we're going to talk about that as well. And I also want to get into, there was an interesting piece that talked about, when we were talking about political rhetoric, and we were talking about how it was getting so heated, and now it's getting sometimes violent. And I mentioned on the show that I really think a lot of this is bigger than left versus right. And I've heard some commentary on this, and I've read some stuff on this, and there's other people that are starting to kind of see and talk and expand upon that view. And I think there's interesting points, and it has to do with civility not only in our politics, but in our society as a whole, because everyone's focusing on civility in politics, but I've seen, in a lot of cases, a lack of civility beyond politics. And while some things in our society are really good, crime rates are really low, for instance, there does seem to be this sort of lack of civility that used to be there that's kind of going away in a lot of parts of our society, even beyond politics. And that's why I was saying this is so much bigger than left versus right. So I want to get into that. We'll probably get into that in the next hour. We're going to end this hour with things so beyond reason. You just can't make them up. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We have Paul producing, and we will be right back.
Is now on YouTube. Go to YouTube now and just search Beyond Reason Radio. This is Orlando's Smart Talk Radio. Beyond Reason Radio continues now.
Oh, I can't, just so excited to talk about this story. Just can't wait for Paul's reaction to both of these stories. I just can't, when I see stuff like this, we're going to talk this. There's a couple stories here that are so beyond reason you just can't make them up. And sometimes I see stories like this, and I just can't believe in the world, the world that we live in today, in 2017, that this stuff is even happening, and it's happening so quickly in our society.
That's the part I have a hard time with sometimes. When I'm looking at some of this stuff, and I'm like, really?
Like, when did
this is where we're at now?
And it is. And, when it comes to this issue, this is one where I think Christians and conservatives, but I mean, this is more than just a conservative liberal thing. This is a Christian, and we're not winning in this issue in the pop culture. The pop culture is really, really pushing this.
We tackled it the wrong way from the beginning.
We really possibly
did.
But the pop culture has really pushed this agenda on us, and that's the transgender stuff. The pop culture and has just made this so forefront, and they've made it, they've said this is similar to racism and stuff. If you don't agree with transgenderism, you're a bigot, and it's been so forced on us that, people are like, well, I don't want to be a hateful person. Yep. I don't want to be called a bigot.
Yeah.
So they just accept it. And in a free society, you can do what you want, but I just read stuff like this and I'm like, are we just ignoring reality at this point?
Yeah, we are. And you know what's funny?
Like
this story that you're talking about proves the ignorance of the idea of transgenderism, that you can actually become a different gender. This article proves it.
Exactly right. So what we're talking about is a transgender man, which
always confuses me.
Confuses me too.
I never know which one they're talking about.
Confuses me too. He used to be a woman, and he transitioned to a man apparently. And I don't even know how. He has a beard now. He doesn't have breasts. I don't know how this happens. But they give him testosterone and all. I don't know. It's crazy. But he made a YouTube video, in which he said, and there's audio I have here, Paul, in which he said this. And we'll get your reaction. Play it for me.
A little while after I switched back to Testigel, I had a visit from an incredibly, very unwelcome guest. I basically got my period for the first time in nearly 4 years. It was also, ironically, a couple months after I just made a video about getting your period as a trans guy. I felt really kind of very awful about it at the time. I worked hard to not let it affect me in a negative way. I know it's so much easier to say that than it is to do it. I just reminded myself that it was only for a few days, it wouldn't last forever, I was going to get it sorted, and it didn't make me any less of a man.
Okay. So,
oh goodness.
He comes out and he says, for the first time in 4 years, I had my period.
That statement in itself, he came out and said he had his period.
You're right. I kind of fell into their agenda that they're pushing. She, because that's what she is, came out and said, had the first period. And then came out and said, but that doesn't make me, I didn't let it bother me because it doesn't make me any less of a man.
I just can't. I just can't.
And this is not me being hateful towards the guy, girl, I don't know. But my initial reaction was, yes.
It
Yes,
definitely
it
does make you less of a man to have a period. Having a period is like if there was any like one defining thing that we could point out that would make you less of a man, having a period is that thing.
Yes.
That is the shedding of the egg from your fallopian tubes. It makes you less of a man.
Exactly. I can't. I always love Paul's reaction to this. I cannot understand. I cannot understand this. I can't understand this topic. I can't understand the agenda. I can't understand anything. That somehow because you feel you're something different, and feelings change, especially when you're dealing with little kids. And I'm going to get into that.
Oh my God! Don't get me started.
That you feel, and I posted something about a kid transitioning on Facebook, and I had someone comment and, said, well, transgender people, they're depressed if they don't get to change their genders, and they, want to commit suicide, and that's why we have to just accept them and let them and possibly force their parents to put the transition in place, because they'll get depressed. When most studies show that a lot of them, for one, if they say they're transgender as a kid, they usually grow out of it. Two, that suicides still happen even after the transition. A lot of the times.
From what I've read, it's more.
Yeah, that the transition really doesn't change anything because it's a mental disorder is what's happening. That's what's really happening. There's something mentally wrong there. It's either caused by something they were raised with, or something else that...
I would even give them chemical imbalance. I'll even give them that.
Yeah. That is making them do this stuff. And by buying into their premise, because that's what's being pushed on us now, that we need to buy into the premise that they are really a man, and we have to help them transition, and we give them testosterone, and we do all these surgeries, because even though biologically in every way, shape, or form they're not, we have to buy into it because they are. And all I can think to myself, and what this transgender person was doing, is we're ignoring reality. It's not reality. Just because you feel a certain way doesn't mean that's what you are. What happened to truth?
Oh,
that's what I don't get.
Why would you say the T word?
And you know what's even... Yeah, I know. And you know what's even more ridiculous about this? So I'm watching a new show on Hulu. It's called The Carmichael Show.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, it's really funny.
It's great, yeah.
About it's from a black stand-up comedian and about a black family and all the issues they go around with this. And I don't know, you probably saw this episode where he was a big brother to someone.
Yes.
And he finds out this kid was transgendered, apparently. Now, this was a young boy who liked to do boy things, who played basketball, who looked like a boy, who acted like a boy, and that he comes out all of a sudden and tells him, I'm actually a girl on the inside.
Yep.
And then the Carmichael character is confused because he doesn't really understand this issue, because nobody does, because it makes no sense. But he's saying, I don't understand. There was one part of it. This is how ridiculous this debate's gotten. There was one part of it where he says, I don't understand because he does all boy things. And the woman in the show goes, there is no such thing as boy things versus girl things.
Yep. Her character is extremely, extremely liberal and feminist.
Yeah. And that's part of the show. And he's kind of, I don't know, he's not really into politics. He kind of goes both ways. He kind of just exposes the ridiculous of it all. And his parents are actually kind of conservative, even though they're black and they voted for Obama. Very interesting, very good show, actually, pretty funny. But I was just thinking, okay, so if there's no difference between a boy and a girl with how they act, then how do you know that you're actually a girl?
Ooh, good one.
Because there's no difference. If there's no difference, doesn't that totally throw out the logic of that you're different on the inside?
Mm-hmm.
This is how ridiculous this whole debate. So we have one side of this debate saying trying to get rid of gender differences at all. You have, stores that are trying to get rid of boys' toy section versus girls' toy section because they say that's society pushing an agenda of what they should act like on them.
What it really is organization. That's all it really is. At the end of the day, you can lump all the toys together in a toy store. I really don't care. But if I'm looking for something that my daughter wants, it's just easier for me to go to the girls' toy section and get it, as opposed to searching through every single toy in the store.
It's not society pushing on them. Usually the companies, they're not pushing anything. They're selling what people want. And the fact is, the girl wants the girl toy. So this whole debate has gotten so ridiculous. So now there's no difference between genders unless you feel you're a different gender on the inside. And then there is a difference. And then we have to help you explore that difference.
Yeah. Because everything is about how you feel now. Mike, you already know how you know.
How do you?
You already know where I stand on this whole life lived through feelings nonsense that we have established in this country. But it is complete and total nonsense.
But how do I know how I feel if what I feel cannot have a definition? See how confusing this all is. So I just saw this and I was like, my initial reaction was, yes, it makes you less of a man. It's not an insult.
Oh my God, it does. To have a menstrual cycle makes you less of a man.
It's not an insult. It's just reality. All right, we have 1 more hour to go. The results have come in from the Georgia election, some of the results. So we'll talk about that in the next hour. 1 more hour to go. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back. So we have some results coming in already from the Georgia presidential race, biggest election in the history of elections, apparently.
Biggest election in the history of 2017 elections.
$50 million being spent on this. Okay. I mean, that's what it feels like. Who would have ever thought
it would have cost $50 million to win the 6th congressional district in Georgia?
It's ridiculous. Like, I know I'm supposed. These are one of those issues. There's a bunch of these issues lately. These are one of these issues where I guess I'm supposed to care a lot more than I actually do, because it's one election, and I know people like Ossoff because apparently he sounds like Obama.
He's a good-looking cat too.
Yeah, but
he's young.
Apparently he's pretty moderate, from what I understand, which you have to be in that district, I guess. But they're trying to make this. The perception is. They're trying to make this will be what 2018 looks like. This election will be, if Ossoff wins, I'll say that the Republicans are going to lose in 2018 big time. When really the reality, I like to talk about reality on this show, maybe a little too much, is that it's not. It's just one election. And it doesn't mean... There might be some people in that district who are voting because of Trump, a bunch of people, but it's not reflective of the entire country.
It's really not. Especially not in Atlanta.
Yeah, both sides are trying to make it that way, but it's not. It's more of a reflection on the changing demographics in Georgia, if anything. But it's just one election in one district. But, I told you we would update the latest numbers on this. And so it's Karen Handel versus John Ossoff. And so what are the latest numbers on that?
Right now, Karen Handel is up by 1.7 percentage points over John Ossoff, 50.9 to 49.1, with 24% of precincts reporting. So far, it looks like about 140,000 votes in.
So, I mean, it's pretty close.
It's pretty close.
It's not going to be called.
No, it's not going to be called now.
A while, and it's all I can think is $50 million.
Yes, sir.
And this is for
like I said before, I'm just very upset that conservatives fed into this drama, that they fed into this propaganda that was being pushed out by liberals in Georgia, because you had a guy who was running in a district that's normally won by a conservative, normally won by a bunch of points, and he was close. So now all of a sudden, everybody in this district hates Trump, and it's a referendum on Trump. And then for some reason, conservatives started dumping money into it, dumping time into it.
Trump's
doing robocalls and tweets and stuff. And it's like, why are you feeding into this?
Yeah. So now if Ossoff wins, the Republicans have bought into the premise that it's a referendum on Trump, and it will make Trump look bad. The Democrats are always going to use that, but it's not reality. It's just not. If anything, whatever happens in 2018, there will be a lot of issues that come up again. Most of it will be a reflection not on Trump, but on the Republican Congress.
Yeah.
On whether if they can actually get the things accomplished.
We have a Congress?
Yeah, exactly
this year?
right.
We have one?
Exactly right. If they can get anything accomplished this session before 2018, that's what the election will be about. Some of it, yes, will be about Trump, but it's not all going to be about Trump in this one election, is it? All right, this is Beyond Reason Radio. I haven't introduced myself. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We've been on since 8 p.m. The first hour, if you missed the first hour, you want to check out the podcast, which I will post later. You can like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page, or send me a friend request on Facebook, or follow me on Twitter at Beyond Reason R. I talked about what Batman, and specifically the Dark Knight movie, can teach us about current politics. So you want to check that out and share it with your friends. Really interesting, I think, anyway. And it was a chance to play the awesome Dark Knight soundtrack music by Hans Zimmer, which might have been the only reason I did that whole segment. I'm just saying. But yeah, you can check that out. We're going to get into a lot of different subjects today. Later in the hour, I want to get into this whole debate over the Senate looking at Obamacare, and they seem to be doing it behind closed doors, and everyone's upset about it. I'm going to tell you what's really going on with that. And frankly, it's worse than what the Democrats are saying, at least for me. So we'll get into that. And then they're also talking about how Republicans are thinking about working through this session, or working through the time off. They usually take an August recess, but they're saying maybe we'll work through it to get some stuff done. I don't know if they can't get it done now. I don't know why people think they're going to get it done during any kind of break, but that's where we are on that. So we'll get to that. And then we have something that made Yaffee laughy. So we'll get to that as well. But I want to talk about something I talked about in the last show. We talked about the heated political rhetoric in this country and how we seem to be so divided, the social civil war, as I've called it before on the show, and the lack of civility. And I've actually talked about before how the lack of civility, in my opinion, is so much bigger than left versus right. And really, in my opinion, so much bigger than politics. It really is. So I found a piece that I've heard other people talk about this as well, from Eric Erickson. He put this piece out last week that kind of talks about this. And he goes in line with the James Hodgkinson trying to kill Republicans, shooting them, and how this is a turning point. But what he gets into, I think, is why this is happening in our country. And I'll see if you agree. You can call 407-916-5400 or text to 23680 and give your take. He says this about where the country is and why we become so divided. And this goes in line with what I've said. This is beyond politics. He says, now we are in a more tribal country. He says, several times since the election, I've noted that Democrat rhetoric, if they really believed it, would lead to violence. One cannot continually say Republicans repealing Obamacare will kill people without taking action to stop them or inspiring others to stop them. While rhetoric does not necessarily lead to violence and has rarely led to violence in this country, something now is fundamentally different from the past. He says, now we are a more tribal country. Large segments of the left and growing segments of the right no longer have church communities calling them to be better angels, to be their better angels. He says people are now less likely to know their neighbors than in the past. And instead of interacting in their real communities, they have turned inward and built digital communities of fellow travelers. He says it is now possible for a person to go an entire day and never knowingly encounter someone who thinks at all differently. We can self-select websites to read, television channels to watch, and radio stations and podcasts to listen to. It's kind of one of the beauties of new technology and the internet, is you can select what you want to read and what you want to watch and what you want to listen to. We're not all listening and reading and watching the same things. We're reading and listening and watching things that go with our preconceived beliefs. He goes with us being a tribal country. He says we never have to be troubled with the other. As we encounter the other less and less, we see them as alien. As we see them as alien, it becomes easier to see them as less than ourselves. It becomes not only easier to then view them as the enemy, but also easier to cheer on violence against the other. He says, when you create your own world instead of living in the world God created for you, you can make it in your own image. Soon you can believe the worst about others when those you have allowed into your world agree. The only way to back away from this instead of falling over the precipice is for Democrats, Republicans, and the media to acknowledge that the other side really doesn't want you dead. But there is too much invested in believing otherwise. So what he is saying here is that we have become so tribal, and it's so easy to become tribal. And it's so easy to close yourselves off from other groups. A lot easier than it used to be. That there's no common, the idea of a common American identity is sort of fading away, is his point. And, in terms of this piece, I would also encourage you, I've talked about it before, read the book Pendulum. It talks about this as well, how we are part of the we generation, where we're breaking off into tribes or groups. Talks about it in the book. We're in that cycle in the pendulum of generations where we break off into groups, and the group you're a part of is much more important than the individual and much more important than the principles. It's all about what group you're a part of. And once you live in a society where the group you're a part of, the tribe you're a part of is everything, and all you do is talk about, listen to, read things from that tribe, and all that tribe does is talk about how evil the other side is, it's not too much of a stretch to think they're so evil that they deserve to be stopped by any means. And I talked about this in the last hour, that so much I've heard from my fellow Republicans out there, fellow Trump supporters, is the left is so bad that we have to fight fire with fire. They need to be stopped by any means necessary. And this goes beyond even what Erickson is saying. We've gotten to a point where there was always, for instance, there was always nut jobs out there who believe nutty things about the world. But now it's easier for those nut jobs through the internet, through social media, through other means, to connect with other nut jobs. So they connect with the other nut jobs, and you now have a whole group of nut jobs, and they're sort of all agreeing with each other, and they're sort of perpetuating this whole thing, and now you feel more strengthened because you're with that group. So we have ourselves in this we society, the us versus them society, where we're all breaking off in these different groups. And we now believe that if you're not a part of your group, then you're against us. So if you don't believe the same things we believe, if you don't act the same way we act, then you're against us and you have to be stopped. And it's kind of ironic in a way. It's kind of a paradox because in some ways, Facebook, social media, the internet, everything has made us easier to connect with other people than ever before. But what's happened is it's also made us easier to close ourselves off from other ideas and other groups of people and the way other people think. And this is going way beyond just politics. It can go to religion. It can go to social groups, whatever it is. Black Lives Matter, our group, racial groups. And it makes the point that maybe what we need to start doing is step back, realize that, yes, we have our differences. Yes, we have our own groups. But we're also, especially in this country, we're all Americans. And there is a common identity in some ways. There are some things we could unite on, we should unite on. One of those things that we should unite on, you would think would be the First Amendment. You would think would be freedom of speech. You would think would be not wanting to stop others from speaking, even if you disagree with them. That used to be a common thing we could unite on, or freedom of religion, for instance. And then we have to get back to say, okay, maybe there are some things we can unite on. That yes, we're going to have our disagreements. Yes, we're going to have our debates. Yes, we're going to want to win elections and want to get agendas put through. But that doesn't mean that those who disagree with us are evil. There are evil people out there, yes. But you're not going to get rid of the other side completely. So I just thought that was an interesting take on this. How it's become so easy for us in so many ways to close ourselves off from other ways of thinking, from other groups. And we become so obsessed with the group we're a part of that sometimes we forget, we're all human beings. I think a lot of Trump, people who don't like Trump, I think they really look at him as not human in a way. And we forget that, yes, he is still a human being. Or we look at someone from the other side almost as not human. We demonize them. And I think, what about just general respect, beyond just respect for other people's opinion? What about just general civility and respect for our fellow man? And all you have to do is maybe drive around in traffic and see that sometimes there's a lack of respect for our fellow human beings. But I'm not sure what the solution is to this, other than Jesus, in my opinion, that if we follow the principles of Christ, then we can go along, we can at least tolerate each other more. But just an interesting debate, I think. Paul, you look like you have something to say.
Well, I mean, you're right about the Christianity aspect of it, but so many Christians don't take their time to be Christians anymore, especially when it comes to politics. They're more political than they are Christian. It's
interesting. I've talked about on the show before how my Christianity, my faith trumps my conservatism.
And for most people, it doesn't. It really doesn't.
It seems like it's
either that the conservatism is a bigger deal than the Christianity, or they've somehow merged the two. And that's just not how it should be.
But what do you think about the idea? Well, we'll talk about it more on a break. I want to get your take, and we'll get callers and texter takes as well. And a lot more to get to. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you like Beyond Reason Radio, well, make sure to show it by liking the Facebook page at facebook.com/Beyond Reason Radio. The place where we talk faith, culture, and politics. Beyond Reason Radio continues.
Yes, welcome back to the show. So far, the election results in Georgia in the 6th Congressional District, which nobody even knew where it was or existed until just a few months ago, and now it's apparently the most important district in the history of American politics, I guess. Karen Handel is leading 51.6% to John Ossoff, 48.4%, so about 3 percentage points lead. Still a little while to go. That's with 39% of the precincts reporting. So we'll see what happens. Still pretty close, obviously too close to call. Karen Handel seems to have a little bit of an edge there, which means we'll get to see if she wins. We'll get to see all the headlines using her last name about how the Republicans handled this election, or Ossoff couldn't handle Karen Handel. So there you go. So another thing I wanted to get to in today's show was this whole thing with North Korea. Because, I mean, what's happened? I still don't understand what in the world they did to this kid. Otto Warmbier, sorry. What they did to him. I mean, they said there was some brain tissue missing or something. He had severe brain damage from being back from North Korea. What in the world did they do to this kid? And they basically just said, oh, this kid's dying. We're just going to drop him off to the U.S. and let them deal with it. I mean, it's...
And here's the thing. People are lauding and applauding his return, but I don't doubt that was the reason for his return. Better him to die in the United States than in North Korea.
Yeah, and I just want to know... I want the autopsy. I guess they haven't released the full autopsy yet, so we'll have to see. But I mean, it is not good. But so now the question is, how do we respond? Is there a way to respond to this? This has been a question with North Korea for a while. We've almost tried everything with economic sanctions and political pressure and all that stuff, and it's not working.
Well, didn't we just send Dennis Rodman over there? I mean, that's all we needed, right?
Oh,
Dennis Rodman.
I forgot about Dennis Rodman being over there. Oh, it's all settled then. They're fine now. They're free. They're free now. Oh, Dennis Rodman saved the world, and he saved the Koreans. In all seriousness, though, I've seen a couple of different takes. And all I have to say is, man, the world is... There's a lot of dangerous stuff going on in the world right now.
Do you really believe there will be a response? I don't believe there's going to be any response. There's not going to be a response whatsoever.
I don't know what we could do because, as I've talked about before, there are things we could do, but this country right now is not willing to do those things. We're not willing to go to war for this. We're just not. There could be an argument to do that, but I just don't see right now, with the way the country is, I don't see the American people supporting it.
Not a chance.
So, but I mean, there was a piece by Todd Starnes in Fox News where he said basically we should rain down. I mean, his exact words were, let's see. I think he said like hellfire or something. The president must send an unequivocal message to Kim Jong-un. Harm another American citizen. Armed forces of the United States will rain down hellfire on his godforsaken wasteland of a nation. So he's saying give them...
We're going to use those words exactly in the letter that we're putting out? Yeah, godforsaken wasteland of a nation? We're going to use that?
Yeah, they'll like that.
Okay, cool.
I think so. I mean, it kind of is. But he's saying basically we should give them an ultimatum. That if they do that again, we'll bomb the heck out of you.
Do what again exactly?
Kill
a detained American?
Yeah. I mean, that's his point. It's interesting, but I don't think it's going to happen.
No way.
So, and then we have another take that I found. Former Ambassador Michael Bolton was on Fox News earlier today, and he was saying there needs to be regime change. And I was thinking... Whoa. I know that term, regime change.
Yeah, that doesn't sit well in the American society.
Not right now.
Not at all.
But this is what he said. Go ahead and play that.
We've seen enough of North Korea over the past 25 years to know they're not going to change their behavior because we put pressure on them. I think it's time to cut to the chase here and look at what we really need to do with this regime that commits acts of terrorism, that's pursuing nuclear weapons, that oppresses its own people. We need to end this regime. And the way we end the regime is by reuniting the Korean Peninsula. It won't be easy. We need Chinese help. We should have started on it a long time ago. We see the character of the North Korean regime. Economic pressure isn't going to change that. I think we know that China has economic power over North Korea unsurpassed by anybody else. They supply over 90% of North Korea's oil. They provide substantial amounts of humanitarian assistance, food, and other things. We could bring this regime down with Chinese cooperation. We need to convince China it's in their interest to end the North Korean regime and the nuclear threat that it poses across East Asia. I understand that's a reversal of China's position for many, many years. But the fact is, if the Chinese are serious, that they don't want a nuclear North Korea because it will induce Japan to get nuclear weapons, the only way to solve that problem is to end the regime. We can do it in a way that minimizes the disruption without threatening China. We need to embark on that diplomatic effort now, because otherwise, in a very short period of time, the North Koreans will have the capability to drop atomic weapons on the United States via ballistic missile.
So his point is that we can have regime change, but we can basically have China just do it for us, and we won't have to do it militarily. So China, I guess China supplies a lot of food there, a lot of weapons there, a lot of aid there, oil there, that if we get China to just stop doing that completely, the regime will just collapse.
Why would China do that?
Well, that's the question, because China has had no interest in doing that before.
No.
He's saying that the reason why China maybe would want to do something like that is they don't want North Korea to get nuclear weapons, because that means Japan would then want to get nuclear weapons, and you would have an arms race in Asia, and that is not in China's best interest to have that kinds of arms race in that part of the world. And maybe that's what you could get to do.
But we say that as if China is not intimately involved in whether Korea gets nuclear weapons or not.
Well, not only that, but Russia.
Exactly.
Russia's involved with that. Where do you think they're getting the technology?
That's what I'm saying.
They're not creating it on their own.
Yeah, exactly. A country that doesn't have food is creating nuclear weapons on their own. And not only that,
but if you just totally starve them, they could just start shooting off the nukes.
Why not?
Because they have nothing to lose.
Exactly.
So the world's a dangerous place. Right now you have Russia threatening to shoot down our planes. You have, and then you have what's going on with North Korea. And I wish I knew what the best solution is. I think, a lot of us say, well, we just need to leave them alone, do nothing, isolationism. I tend to think isolationism is impossible in the world of today.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Especially since South Korea is one of our biggest trading partners. So if North Korea ever did anything to South Korea, it would directly affect us and our economy. It's just a fact. And if they ever did anything to Japan, it would directly affect us. It's just a fact. But I don't know. I just don't think this is another. The whole thing with Syria was another thing, because people are saying now we need to have a real discussion about debating in Congress to send troops into Syria. And I'm thinking there might be good arguments for these things, but I know that right now the American people, they are not going to want to do it.
But that's not even the way the American government's set up right now. You can debate in Congress all you want to. Trump's already handed the power of raising or lowering the troop levels in different battle zones to the Pentagon. You can debate it in Congress all you want to, so it doesn't really matter.
Well, the Pentagon can strip funding, or the Congress can strip funding. There are things that can happen, and there are things that need to be debated and all that stuff. Yeah, and then you have what's going on in Afghanistan. They want to send more troops to Afghanistan. The Middle East is becoming, so you have the problems in Syria, then Russia's involved, then you have Qatar, the problems with them in Saudi Arabia.
And how many conflicts are we going to be involved in all at the same time, and then try to initiate regime change in North Korea at the same time while we're fighting in Afghanistan, still battling about ISIS, and then talking about Syria and all of this kind of stuff? Come on, man.
That's what I'm saying. That's World War level stuff.
Exactly.
That's how big it was in World War II. And the fact is, if we really wanted to as a country, we could.
Oh, yeah.
Because we did it in World War II. But it would take immense sacrifice. And unfortunately, a lot of lives lost.
Absolutely.
And but it just as a country, it would take immense sacrifice financially and in a bunch of other ways.
In a lot of ways. And then on top of all of that, the entire country has to get on board with these unmanned death machines flying all around, bombing every city in the world.
Exactly. And I mean, maybe it's a debate we should have, but I just don't think because we haven't been attacked, we don't feel like we need to because we're very comfortable in our country right now. We don't feel we're under threat, even though we kind of are in a lot of ways.
And then we're
not going to convince the American people to do this.
Exactly, because we haven't been articulated a true benefit of doing so.
Right. Exactly. And we have it too good here. And we don't want to mess that up. But what worries me is when you read history, good things don't last forever. And I just hope it doesn't take, something really bad happening to us, like an EMP or something, for us to want to get involved. I don't know. This is why I am not president of the United States. I don't think anybody would want that either. But I'm just telling you right now, we're not going to go to war with North Korea. I know there's a lot of talk about that. It's not going to happen. I just don't think it's going to happen. 407-916-5400, text to 23680. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Download the iHeart Radio app and catch the Beyond Reason Radio podcast. Your safe space for conservative thought, not for political correctness. Yaffee is back right now.
Yes, welcome back to the show. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We've been on since 8 p.m. If you missed any of the shows so far, you can catch the podcast anywhere podcasts are available. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn Radio app, Spreaker, or just download the Beyond Reason Radio app. Make sure to send me a friend request on Facebook or like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page. You can see the live video. We're on Facebook Live now, or you can see the live video from the first hour there as well. So there's been a lot of discussion, or lack of discussion, I guess, of what's going on in the Senate over the health care bill. Because the House passed a health care bill, which, by the way, Trump last week called it mean. The health care bill was just too mean, he said. And I'm like, really mean, Trump? Way to just totally buy into the Democrat narrative by calling it mean. You're just basically falling in line with what they're saying about it. It's too mean. So I don't understand the political. I know. It's just, if Trump would just keep his mouth shut.
I've been saying that for a very long time. It's just
like every problem of his presidency is
exasperated by him.
Yes.
Yes.
It's not really his policies. It's his mouth.
We don't even have a chance to figure out his policies.
I know. But he says it's too mean. So the Senate's been kind of doing behind closed door meetings trying to put this bill together. So Bernie Sanders, he had like a Facebook forum with him and Elizabeth Warren, which is
scary.
I'm like, there's the future of the Democrat Party. There's your leadership of the Democrat Party, the two most socialist members of the party. But here's Bernie Sanders talking about just that very thing in terms of the Republicans and what they're doing. This is what he said.
Our Republican colleagues are so cowardly, are so frightful that the American people will learn what's in their legislation. They refuse to have one hearing, one open discussion about it.
Okay, so there you go. And I'm gonna make the point here that I don't think that's really what's going on. But what is going on is not good. Before I get to that, though, I think a lot of people are forgetting that, and this is just one of those things where there's hypocrisy in politics everywhere.
Yes, sir.
We're forgetting that the Democrats did a lot of the similar things with health care back when they passed Obamacare. In fact, we all remember when Nancy Pelosi said this.
We're you've heard about the controversies within the bill, the process about the bill, one of the items. But I don't know if you have heard that it is a legislation for the future. Not just about health care for America, but about a healthier America, where preventive care is not something that you have to pay a deductible for or out of pocket. That prevention is about diet, not diabetes. It's going to be very, very exciting. But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it away from the fog of the controversy.
So we all remember that. You have to pass the bill to find out what's in it. There's a lot of controversy, she said, about how this is being rushed. And she was even called out on Meet the Press not too long after that, where she was asked, isn't this one of the problems that this was rushed before we actually knew what was in it, and that there's a lot of unintended consequences of this? So the whole idea, this is just the biggest example of hypocrisy in politics. The whole idea that the Democrats are now upset because this is being rushed and done in secret, they don't care.
But let's look at the other side as well.
What?
Because you had all of the Republicans that were outraged that the Democrats were doing this in secret.
Exactly.
And not saying anything, and now it's their turn.
Yeah, exactly. It just shows it goes back and forth. They don't care about the secret.
No.
The secrecy
Neither
of it.
side. Neither side.
It's an interesting political talking point that can be used to kind of get votes and gin up the base. But they don't care. And the Democrats are not going to like it. If it was all out in the open, they wouldn't like it anyways, and they would find another thing to complain about. But I wanted to make the point that I haven't heard too many people make. The Democrats are trying to say, and Bernie Sanders said there, that the reason why they're doing this in secret is they don't want the American people to know what's in it. And they don't want the Democrats to know what's in it. I think it's worse than that. I think these Republicans that are doing this stuff in secret behind closed doors in the Senate, we're finding out that a lot of the conservatives, the real conservatives in the Senate, are being pushed out of the debate in this health care bill. So what is really going on, in my opinion, is I think the Senate leadership doesn't want the conservatives to know what's in it. I don't think it's even about hiding it from the Democrats. They don't care what the Democrats think. I think they're worried about conservatives in the Senate.
Because that's who's going to lambaste the bill. Well, that's who's going to shut it down, just like they shut down the first two House bills.
Yeah, because they don't want, the Senate leadership doesn't really want to repeal it like they should. And the conservatives are calling them out on it.
That's right.
And now the Senate's like, well, we have to hide this from them.
Because that first bill was nowhere near a repeal and replace of Obamacare.
Yeah.
At the most, it was a tweak and tinker.
Exactly. So, but I wanted to point this out is that I have some audio from Mike Lee. Mike Lee talks about how he's getting calls on this. And this is what he said about it that totally makes the point I'm making.
I had a lot of people ask me specifically when the health care bill is going to be released to the public, why it isn't public. The short answer to the question is I haven't seen it yet either. Even though I've been a member of this working group among Senate Republicans assigned to help narrow some of the focus of this, I haven't seen the bill. And it has become increasingly apparent in the last few days that even though we thought we were going to be in charge of writing a bill within this working group, it's not being written by us. It's apparently being written by a small handful of staffers for members of the Republican leadership in the Senate. Oh. So if you're frustrated by the lack of transparency in this process, I share your frustration. I share it wholeheartedly. The American people need and deserve to be able to see legislation as it moves through the Senate.
And here is my big problem with where conservatives believe they're going in these next few years. Because you already have Democrats outraged. Who cares? That's just the way they are. But you are now turning your own against you and eating yourself from the inside out because you are trying to, you're not being who you promised you were going to be for the whole time Obama was president. You are not being that person that you promised you would be.
Well, and that's the point is the conservatives like Mike Lee, they are being it.
I'm sorry, Republicans. You're right.
Yeah, but the Republican leadership, and then he goes, "Oh, it's just some staffers writing it. That's just lovely." And that's usually what happens.
Absolutely.
But just let the underling staffers write this, and we'll just pass whatever. It'll be 5,000 pages and totally ruin everything. But whatever. But he points out that what you're saying, and that's what I think is happening. That the Republican leadership, they were all talk during the time when they said they wanted to repeal it and replace it and actually do a full repeal and all. It was all talk back then.
It had to have been.
And
because
so you have conservatives like Mike Lee, and I heard an interview with Ted Cruz on the way in, and Ted Cruz said the same thing. He said, I haven't read the bill. He's like, I don't know what's in it.
How are you on the working group and you haven't read the bill?
I know. They were supposed to be in the working group. It just shows it was a fraud to put them in this working group to make them think they were a part of it, but they weren't a part of it. So really, the Democrats are the ones shouting and all this stuff. But really, the ones who should be worried are conservatives. The real conservatives who actually want a real conservative free market solution, they're being pushed out.
But see, and this is where they're going to mess up, though, because when Obamacare was passed, there were very few Democrats that weren't on board.
Yeah.
That weren't like, hey, this is what we wanted. It's not everything we wanted, but this is what we're going to go with because this is what we believe is the right thing to do.
Although there's a lot of Democrats, not a lot, but there are some Democrats now who are not happy with Obamacare.
That's true. But at the time, they were in.
Yeah.
But now you've got these Republicans that are, and it's something I've been saying from the time Obama was in presidency, and specifically after Trump was voted in and you didn't have a bill ready to go. You've been repealing it for 8 years and didn't have anything ready to go. That immediately told me you're a complete fraud.
Well, and the biggest problem, I think, is we're talking about the divide in the country and even the divide in the Democrat Party, but there's a big divide in the Republican Party.
There really is, yeah.
Because you had real conservative base through the Tea Party that put in a lot of conservatives, but then you had the regular Republicans who have been there forever, who still take a lot of the Senate and a lot of the House of Representatives, and they've been there forever, and we're finding out they're not really conservative as they've been saying they
Not
are.
at all. And then the problem is you add to that mess a president who's not really conservative either.
Especially
who
on
ran
this issue.
on conservative ideals.
And on this issue, especially healthcare, and it was something I warned about in the primary. I said, Trump is not conservative on healthcare. So he is not, someone who says that the House bill is mean is not conservative on this issue. So it's going to be, I think you're going to find a lot of real conservatives not happy with what's in the bill. And this is one of the issues. We own the House and the Senate, but does conservatism own it? Doesn't look like it. 407-916-5400, text to 23680. We have something that made Yaffee laughy. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Listen to the latest episodes of Beyond Reason. Download the podcast at Spreaker.com. Your voice of truth in a world of fake news. Beyond Reason Radio continues right now.
So I just checked the latest with the congressional race in Georgia's 6th district. It turns out Karen Handel is starting to get a pretty good lead with 79% of the precincts reporting. She has a 5 percentage, she's up by 5 points, 52.4% to 47.6%. So that would be, I guess, the biggest loss ever for the Democrats with everyone's obsession.
The biggest loss ever
with this congressional race. So
this
we'll see how they spin
up
this.
The Republican nominee for 2020.
Oh, is that? Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
That's true. Yeah, 2018 will be a landslide for Republicans.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks to Georgia.
All right. So I wanted to end the show once again on a lighter note with something that made Yaffee laughy. Yes, something that made Yaffee laughy, and I have not told Paul this story, although you just told me some breaking news in the break that Dwight Howard, who used to play for the Magic, just got traded.
Traded to the Charlotte Hornets.
That makes me laugh. So that's something. That's all I was going to talk about, but I just want to draw that. So medical marijuana is being a big thing in the country now. A lot of people support it. But what's happening is very interesting. According to something I found on Yahoo News, medical marijuana woos four-legged fans. That's right. More and more people are giving marijuana to their dogs and their pets. And apparently it's for medical reasons, Paul.
I was going to say, I know they're writing the prescriptions to go with it.
Yes. Oh, yes. It's early morning just after breakfast, and 6-year-old Kaylee is wide awake, eagerly anticipating her daily dose of cannabis.
I bet she is.
The black Labrador, tail wagging.
Why she got to be a black lab? Huh?
Laps up the liquid. Tincture owner Brett Hartman squirts into her mouth. So they squirt some kind of
cannibal
liquid.
wood. Yeah.
That's interesting. Into their dog so the dog can get high. Jeez. Ever since I started her on this cannabidol, it's called cannabidol, a marijuana extract, cannabidol. Yeah. Her separation anxiety has disappeared.
I bet you all anxieties disappeared. So wait a minute. I'm getting my dog high so they won't tear up the house while I'm gone?
Yes.
Jeez.
Now this is a service dog. So it says
I heard somebody told me about a service parrot the other day.
Oh dear, I don't even want to know. I don't even want to know. That's for a future show right there. But Hartman, who lives near Los Angeles, said he turned to medical marijuana for Kaylee after he no longer needed to accompany him everywhere, having himself overcome epilepsy. So he had epilepsy, he had a service dog, and now the service dog apparently has
epilepsy.
Yeah, no, has separation anxiety. So the solution is to get her high. We are seeing about 20% growth every single month. Founder of Treatwell, a company in California that specializes in non-psychoactive medical cannabis products for animals and humans. Owners of dogs, cats, lizards, turtles, horses.
Why do you need to get your turtle high?
I don't know. It's a growing business here, Paul. The animals need the weed.
Why do you need to get your turtle high?
It does
I
not
don't
say.
understand that.
Oh, see, I knew it would make you laugh. And it is Beyond Reason. I thank you all for joining me tonight for another edition of Beyond Reason Radio. If you miss any of the show, catch out the podcast anywhere podcasts are available, or like us on Facebook, Beyond Reason Radio, or follow me on Twitter at Beyond Reason RN. Well, I'll catch you guys next time.
Oh, well,